right. Hello and welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have all of you here live to learn from the amazing Eric Cross. My name is Lauren Dennis, and I am with Designed for Learning. I will be the moderator for the session and will be helping out in the chat. So if you have any questions or anything, I'll be over there. Eric is going to be diving into STEM to support all learners and inclusion to shift to a learner-centered practice. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric and we can get started.
Thanks so much. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending on where you are. If you could, let's see, are we able to communicate in the chat, Lauren?
Yes, the chat is on.
Okay. If you could, let me know where you're at in the chat. What area of the country are you in? What city, what state, just to make sure that we have everything in there working, because there is going to be some interactive component to this. So we'll keep the chat going. My name's Eric Cross. I'm a middle school science teacher here in San Diego, California. I teach full-time in the classroom, 200 amazing students, 34 per class, 6 classes at an IB charter school. I'm also, when I'm not teaching the little ones, I'm teaching the big ones at the University of San Diego. I'm an adjunct professor in the Department of Teaching and Learning. So I get to have my foot in the classroom full-time, but then I also get a chance to teach up-and-coming learners. Welcome, Maggie, out in Denver. And it's my passion, it's my heart. And being able to talk about this topic is something that's near and dear to me. I do want to start off with a land acknowledgement. I am on Kumeyaay land. This is the land that was historically belonged to the Kumeyaay tribe, which is a product of 13 different tribes here in San Diego. This is something that I start off my school year with acknowledging and kind of explaining that history of that our history here in America and of the indigenous peoples here started actually before the US was settled by European countries. And I encourage other teachers to visit nativelands.org or .ca, and you can see whose land you are on. And I'll drop this in the chat just so you can check that out as well. And if you already know, drop it in the chat and let me know whose land you are on. Now, there's also resources. One thing we encourage people to do is there's a lot of nonprofits that support Native and Indigenous people. And many of those learners on Native reservations or in schools are some of the ones that are most heavily impacted by some of the things that have been going on in society. And so there are some areas that you can donate to and organizations that you can donate to. So I would encourage you to do that for the Native peoples in the land that you reside in. So we'll start off with a warm up. So what I'd like you to do is, with your left eye closed, I want you to focus on the X on the screen. So the plus sign. So focus on the plus sign. So you're going to close one eye. And what I'll do is I'll move myself off the screen. So let me go ahead and disappear myself. And so with your left eye closed, I want you to focus on the plus. And then what I'd like you to do is move in your face in and out towards the screen. So just focusing on the plus. So what you're going to do is you're going to hold your left eye and then you're going to kind of go in. Just focusing on the plus right over here in the corner. So when you're focusing right here, and then what I want you to do is kind of in your peripheral vision without looking at it, I want you to pay attention to what's happening here. And Laura, maybe we can have you do this as well. And tell me what you notice in there. Maggie says the circle disappears. And Lauren, quick check-in. Is what I'm casting on here, are you able to see the just the screen and me, or are you able to see the entire desktop?
I can see the entire desktop.
All right, let me go ahead and see if I can adjust this real quick. Let's make sure that. I'm going to change. And so Linda said that she's able to see the entire screen again as well. So let me go ahead and change this and let's share. There we go.
You're good. Now we can just see your screen.
Awesome. Let's try it this time. So let's switch eyes. So we're gonna do our right eye closed and let's move in and out. So maybe about like a foot kind of back and forth, um, in and out, just to see if you have the same experience moving back and forth. All right. And we're going to change it up a little bit. So similar activity, but in this one, what I'd like you to do is I want you to focus on the plus with your right eye closed. And when you're closing your right eye, moving in and out. So let's say the circle disappears and reappears. Okay. What else do you notice? Right now with the sun, and see if you notice the same phenomena. Does that happen as well? And we'll also switch eyes. Sometimes maybe there's a different eye dominance that you might have, and maybe that can affect something. And this is something that I'll do with students or with teachers as well. This is one of the things that we can do both in the classroom and something that we can do virtually, where we are engaging in some kind of phenomena and asking students what they wonder and what they notice. Some of the two most important questions when teaching STEM. Um, so does the sun disappear here? Yeah, the same thing happens with the sun. Now, one question I wonder, when the sun disappears, is it just blank or does something happen? When the sun's gone, what's there? Is it just white or is it black? Is it like, what do you see there? And this is a question that we'll ask teachers. And what you'll typically probably notice is that when the sun disappears, yeah, you see the background. Yeah, thanks, Linda. So you see the background behind it. And the same thing here too. So if you want to try it with your other eye, you see a background. So your brain starts kind of filling in the gaps behind what's missing. So it kind of starts filling in a story that's there behind what's missing. So this is something that happens biologically. And there's a few other activities that you can do with this. There's different varieties of things that you can do. We do this with teachers and with students in the classroom. It ties into your nervous system. It talks about all kinds of different things that you can do. And again, asking these three questions: what do you notice? What do you wonder? And what do you want to try? And then giving teachers and students the opportunity to be able to experiment this way. And this is when we're actually doing science that works both in an in-person classroom and virtually. So this is one of the things I did with my students. And you might know, if you had any guesses, maybe drop in the chat, like, what do you think's going on here? And maybe we would participate. We'd ask questions, or people would write it down, or you turn and talk with your partner. And what's actually going on is there's a principle behind this called blind spots. So what you're seeing is you're actually seeing or identifying the section of your eyeball where your optic nerve is, and it connects to your eye. And right there, we don't have any light sensing cells. And we all have these blind spots in us. It's built in, it's innate in us. And just like we have physical blind spots, we also have social blind spots that are developed through our experiences growing up. So with physical blind spots, we don't have light detecting cells in that area. So our eyes and our brain constructs a physical reality around the surrounding information. And so we didn't see the sun. So your brain took the surrounding information and filled in the gaps. So it builds stories around facts. And our brains do the same thing with our social blind spots. So it builds stories around facts to fill in the gaps. But these stories and the circumstances that our brains create, they don't often match what reality is for a lot of people. And so John Dewey said, all learning begins with our comfortable idea that turn out to be inadequate in the brain. And this is really the intro as we talk about STEM for all learners, where we link together STEM and science phenomena with a social topic of the fact that, look, blind spots are part of just life. It's not just something that is based on just how you're raised alone. It's part of being a human. So kind of destigmatizing the fact that we have blind spots. And once we have them, then our job is to acknowledge them. And then how do we fix them? In our cars, there are blind spots and we adjust our mirrors when we're driving, right? Something that's just we're used to. But as we're emerging and realizing that we want to address some of the things that we see in STEM, which is a representation of all students and making sure that we're impacting our highest need learners, we need to make sure that we're finding our blind spots so that we can do that. Here's another example that we can do. So in this one, tell me what you hear and let me make sure I'm sharing my sound. All right, sound's going. What do you hear? Do you hear Bart Simpson bouncing? Do you hear rotating pirate ship? How about this isn't my receipt? Lobsters in motion. This is embarrassing. Lactates in pharmacy. I'm chasing a Martian. Baptism piracy. Or this isn't mercy. Let me play it for 15 seconds and then drop in the chat. Tell me what you hear.
That is embarrassing. 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 That is embarrassing.
All right, I'm going to pause it right there. So, which one of those phrases did you hear in the chat? And Lauren, if you didn't hear anything, let me know.
No, we heard it.
All right, awesome. All right, we got this is embarrassing. MB said they can hear them all. Lactates in pharmacy. All right. For some reason, my students always like to say that one too. I'm not sure if they're just trolling me when they say that. At least the top 4 so far. So what I'm going to do now is what I want is have you focus on a different sentence. I don't want you to focus on the one that you did that you heard. Pick a new one and see if you can try to get yourself to hear it. So we're going to focus on a different sentence. So go ahead and pick a different one that you weren't able to hear, and see if you can kind of force your brain to hear that one. So once you have it, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm going to play it again. See if you can hear a different phrase. Same exact sound.
That is embarrassing. 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 That is embarrassing.
Hey, how many of you were able to hear something different that time? Were you able to change what you heard, even though the sounds were the same? So what do you think's happening there? How are you able to hear something different, even though I played the exact same sound? Now, this is an interesting phenomenon. If you remember, there was something that went around the internet, the Yanni Laurel phenomena. Students might also tie in, if you remember, the blue dress yellow, or the blue dress blue and gold, blue and black and yellow and gold dress. There's all these different things that were happening, and people were arguing, and friendships were ending, and families were fighting about whether you heard something or you saw something. And it provokes an engagement and conversation. And again, this kind of relates to the blind spot activity, where depending on what you focused on, depending on how you were primed, you were able to hear something different. And so the next question would be, how did all these experiences, what do they reveal about how we perceive the world? And again, this is one of those conversations that we would have with students based on a phenomena. There's both scientific examples of this, and there's natural, just normal social examples of this, of things that our experiences can dictate what we actually hear, even though objectively the message or the media is not actually changing. And this is called, if you're interested and you want to know more about this, it's called the Mcgirk Effect. It's something that's been widely studied. We're not going to play the video now, but there's a short video on it that talks about the Mcgirk Effect. It's a pretty interesting auditory illusion that happens. So now that we've identified that we all come in with these biases, and we're all kind of influenced by different things, and we have these blind spots, and depending on what our experiences are that are coming in to the classroom or into a school or into a relationship or whatever it is, we're all coming in with a certain variety of experiences. And so will our students. Our students are coming in with funds of knowledge. And as teachers, we want to access that. And whether you work, it doesn't matter what population of students you work with. The fact is, all of our students learn differently. Whether you're working with students of different economic statuses, students who are neurally divergent, students who are gifted, students who various income levels, backgrounds, and experiences, all of those students come in and they learn differently. And our job as teachers is to be able to serve them and ensure that we're meeting the needs where they're at. And that's the challenging thing as a teacher, because in methods courses, like, they don't necessarily cover the aspects of the human beyond just the learner. And what I mean by that is that we learn a lot of scaffolds and strategies for developing literacy and math skills, but we don't learn a lot of the soft skills that you need to be able to enhance deeper learning and to be able to form connections with students, especially students from families that are collective, not families that are as much individualistic. And so a lot of learning is social. So how do we build those deeper connections in the classroom to create a more inclusive environment? And one of the ways I start with this is by sharing this form with teachers. And this is a student input form. And it's a tried and true method, but mine is a little bit different. It's something that's evolved over the years. So on this, I have a couple examples. I created a Google form. It forces a copy. So once you have it, you can open it and then you can edit it to your heart's delight. And on this feedback form, I give it to my students every year after I've told my story about why I became a teacher. And the reason I do that is because I never ask my students to be vulnerable about something if I haven't gone first. It's always important for me to model it. And I want my students to know who I am as a person so that I can have them connect with me, so I can have them go deeper in their learning when they feel like there's a relationship there. And different students resonate with the relationship in different ways. So after they share their name with me, I ask them if there's a preferred name or a nickname they'd like to be called. From there, I ask some basic questions about their access to internet at home. Now, these are questions that I don't want to discover after 6 months of being in the classroom. A lot of times, we as humans, including myself, we build stories around facts, and sometimes students may not be able to be doing the work, or they may not be engaging in the way we want them to, and we can kind of make assumptions as teachers. It's just part of being human. This is one of the ways to mitigate the effects of that. I ask them if they have a working computer, and then who do they live with? I really want to know if a student's going back and forth. For instance, for me in San Diego, California, I live close to Mexico. Some of my students travel back and forth across the Mexican border in a commute when their parents work here, and then they have a home or a residence in Tijuana. That's important for me to know if they're waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and going to bed at 8:30 at night because they're commuting back and forth. I want to know that information. And then I want to know what adults do in their lives. What do they do for work? That's going to be great information for me to know if I'm forming relationships or connecting or creating units that are crafted around the experiences of my students and their families. From there, I ask them about their living situation and then some soft data. I ask them about their favorite YouTube channel. What do they do in their free time? What makes them smile no matter what? And then what are they really good at? And the answer that tells me the most when I do this question with them is when they say nothing. That as a student right away that I know I need to build their self-efficacy and their emotional capacity for. That's where I know that I need to target and build that student up if they say they're not good at anything. And so once I finish this form, at the end, I can create a spreadsheet. And I have a spreadsheet of 200 students. And from there, I spend about an hour going through and flagging and making notes on different students. And this is week 1 or 2. Imagine you had all this data in the beginning of the school year, and you're able to start crafting your learning experiences, your classroom experiences, and your relationship building around this. Now I'm able to contextualize my learning according to who my students are in front of me, as opposed to having to just do a boilerplate kind of lesson or experience that doesn't exactly meet all of my students where they're at. So here I'm collecting data. In this spreadsheet or in this slide, I've included this Google form, and I've also included another one with more questions for the National Equity Project. This is so that teachers can pick and choose different questions that may fit or be tailored to the students that are in front of them. So I've given links to both of those in this slide. And again, in this session as a STEM for all learners, this is something that applies to all STEM teachers, being able to start off with connecting with our students first, which sometimes as a STEM teacher, we want to get into our content because we love it and it's fun, it's exciting, and sometimes it's easy to forget like the human aspect of this. And if we connect with them as people, they're going to connect with our learning in a much deeper way. So as I encourage teachers to be thermostats, not thermometers. In my house, I have a thermostat. The thermostat controls the temperature of the room, whereas a thermometer just reads it. In my classroom, I have to create the culture. And if I'm able to do these activities in the beginning, I've already set a solid foundation for learning that's going to go deeper later on, because now I'm able to leverage my relationship with my students and not just the authority that I have or the power that I have in the classroom. So the next we go to a tried and true method. This is the draw scientist activity. And if you've done this in school, this is a tried and true method that's been done for a long period of time. And what it does is flesh out that our students perceive scientists pretty much the same way. So we have students draw scientists, and they typically draw scientists that are pretty common. Usually they're male, usually they're of Euro descent, and usually they have crazy hair. They look like Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty. And we talk about like, why is this archetype of a scientist something that we always draw? And we ask students, what do you notice? I have them collect data on this and encourage teachers to do the same. So students will go around and they'll collect data on all the different drawings and see if the representation of the scientists they draw represent what our classroom looks like, or what our society looks like, or what our city looks like, or our school looks like. And we ask if there's anything missing. And we start analyzing the data. So here we're doing evidence evaluation, we're collecting data, we're practicing science skills, but we're doing it in a broader context that connects to what many students are already seeing in their own lives. And so we're going to look at some demographic data in the US population, and then we're going to do an activity. So this is a pie chart of the US population in 2014. So it was 67% white, 5% Hispanic, or 5% Asian, 14% Hispanic Latino, 12% Black, 1% multiracial, and then less than 1% Indigenous American Native and Hawaiian Pacific Islander. What you're going to do is I'm going to share with you a slide, and we're just going to take a few minutes. And what I'd like you to do is adjust this slide by choosing a STEM field. So you can choose engineering, you can choose biology, you can choose chemistry or physics. And then I want you to predict how these demographic maps look in that field of science. So you're going to be able to adjust the pie chart by clicking on it and moving the different areas of the pie. So you can make greater pieces of pie and smaller pieces of pie. Let me go ahead and demonstrate that. So your slide will look like this, and you're going to adjust this pie chart for your field of science. So I'm focusing on biology as a biology teacher. So I might adjust this to look a certain way. So here's the slide. I'm going to click make a copy, and I'm going to drop this in the chat. So you'll be able to do the same. So there's access to the slide. And now I'm looking at this, and I chose biology. So I want to change the representation of this pie chart to reflect what I think the representation looks like in the field of biology. So let's say I'm going to start with the white population, which is the largest demographic here. If I click on the pie, you'll notice a little couple orange dots. You can move those orange dots, and it'll increase the size of the pie. So each different slice of pie that you choose, you'll be able to adjust the orange dots to represent the percentage. So now I do this with students and with teachers, and I'd encourage you to do the same. So we take about 10 minutes to do this. And now what we're doing is we're making predictions, or we're making a hypothesis of what we think this is going to look like. How is it going to represent society? And everyone has different answers. And what we tend to find is it doesn't exactly look like what our population looks like, which leads into other questions. And so I'll give you a couple minutes to be able to do this and make those adjustments. And if you'd like to ask any questions in the chat, definitely please feel free. And by the way, these are activities that you can totally do. And I'll give these resources to Molly and to Lauren so that they're able to share it with you as well. So we're doing this with students, and we're fielding this discussion. Now, this is where we're blending these topics that we're seeing that are critically important. The need for representation, the need for inclusion in the classroom is not something new. It's just something that's starting to emerge as becoming in the forefront of education, which is excellent. It's what we want. We want to serve all of our students. The challenge is, especially for STEM teachers, is many of us are experts in our field, but we're not experts in melding our subject matter with the content of some of these social justice, diversity, equity, inclusion type subjects. And that's where we need a lot of support. And I tend to find that people do or don't do things for one of two reasons: unwilling or unable. And with teachers got into the classroom to serve their kids. They got into the classroom to provide them opportunities and to help them have a better life through learning and ultimately through a career pathway. The challenge, though, is many of us didn't learn in a context where they actually combined what our STEM knowledge was with actual application in the real world. And that's where the training comes in, and that's where it's critically important. And so activities like this help do that. So maybe you've been able to adjust your pie chart to represent what you think it looked like, or maybe you just looked at it and you said, you know what, I think this population's a lot smaller than what the US population is going to be. So whether you did it in the slide or whether you just did it in your mind, it's fine. I'm going to show you the results right now. Are you ready? Let me know in the chat if you're ready to see the results, and I'll go to the next slide and show you the representation. And I want you to see whether or not it matched what you thought, or if there's anything that surprised you. Right. So this is the actual representation of data. So here you'll see this is our US population right up here. And then you'll see in the bottom left, this is physics. So here we have 59% white, 32% Asian, 4% Latino, 4% Black, 1% multiracial, and then less than 1% American Indian and Pacific Islander. Moving on to chemistry, we see a greater representation of white Caucasian descent, lesser representation of Asian descent, a greater representation of Latino, and a greater representation of Black. Engineering, you notice a much larger representation here of white and Caucasian, and same thing in biology. So we'll look at this and then have students and teachers kind of go through and figure out, like, what are those things that you wonder? Like, what's something that surprises you? What's something that was consistent with what you already thought? And so moving forward with this knowledge, like, what are some of the causes of this lack of representation? How do we address this? How can our students use their agency to address this problem? And if we go back to the Draw a Scientist activity, this is something that's been going on for a long period of time. We tend to see people that only look a certain way in society, either by gender, by orientation, by ethnic background, by nationality. That's who we imagine as the people that can do that activity. Either implicitly or explicitly, we're being told that, and we're all getting those messages. It just is. So how do we work against it? How do we change it? And these activities kind of help do that. So one of the programs that I share with teachers is the underrepresentation curriculum. This is a free curriculum. It's crowdsourced by a variety of teachers, and it provides curriculum that aligns STEM standards with some of these topics and gives teachers the opportunity to be able to apply these in their classroom. So if you're into hip hop, you may or may not be. There's four kind of fields of hip hop, but two I'm going to use. One's an MC and the other one's a DJ. And an MC is somebody who's like a rapper. They're a lyricist. They're an artist. They're the poet. They're the ones who write new lines. I would align that with like a curriculum developer. They're the ones who create something out of nothing. Whereas your DJ is the one with the turntables. They take existing music and they mix it together to make something new. I am much more of an educational DJ than I am an MC. I like taking curriculum and ideas that other people have created and then remixing it to make something new. One, it's how my mind works. And two, because of my time, there's only so much time that I have. I wish I could write all my curriculum from scratch. But I find it much better to be able to collaborate with other people and contribute because we're able to make something better. And so with the underrepresentation curriculum, teachers can become DJs where they're able to take some of it and fit it in to their scope and sequence where they're able to apply it in their classroom and provide a more inclusive environment by talking about the subjects that are really relevant to students in addition to their STEM subjects. The next one is culturally responsive and sustained curriculum out of NYU. This is something that is great for PDs that I walk teachers through. And what it does is give you a number of different checklists to take a look at the curriculum and kind of objectively evaluate, do we have representation of different groups in our curriculum? And how do we kind of score on this? It's just a great autopsy without blame, which is always the heart that you want to come at this with. This is not something that I'm bad, we're bad. When we all come into it, realizing that we have blind spots, we all see things through a particular lens, it kind of levels the playing field. From there, we're able to move forward and go, okay, what do we do about it? How do we ensure that our students see themselves in the books that we have, in the posters on our wall, in the stories that we tell? So with this score sheet, it allows you to go through your curriculum and take a look at the diversity of authors. Do we incorporate any social justice topics into our discussions, whether it's Henrietta Lacks and HeLa cells, or what has happened with certain populations and vaccines historically, and what's important, what needs to be done about that? One of the things that I think an emerging opportunity that we have is realizing that as technology emerges, the ethics and the morals behind how it's implemented need to be discussed with our students. The slowdown of technology isn't going to happen. We're only accelerating. And I think Ian Malcolm from the movie Jurassic Park said it best. He said, you spent so much time asking if you could, you didn't stop and think whether or not you should. And at a young age, we should also be asking the questions, not just about how do I do genetic engineering, not how do I do balancing equations, not how do I code in Scratch and in Java and in Python, but how can I use this to do good for society? By helping our students look at these subjects through that lens, we're not just creating better thinkers and a highly skilled group of young people, but we're also creating hearts and principles and characteristics in them that will ensure that they'll use those skills for good, in addition to having a prosperous life. From there, we look at representation. So what is the representation score? Again, this is something that's great to collaborate with your teams. Take a look, okay, how did we do here? And then where do we go next? So now that you've done this, we've done this work with your teachers, or they've done it in teams, and every school is different. Every school has a different culture. And I encourage teachers and students and everyone to chew the meat and spit out the bones. Not everything is going to resonate with where you're at, but there are going to be some things that are going to be really, really powerful. And so take something and do it with your kids, or do it with your teams. Maybe it works best as a whole school activity, or maybe it works best with a content team. Wherever it fits best is the best thing to do for you. For my school, it worked great in our content teams. We had a great culture there. We had a great foundation. We were ready to do this work. So let's go back to Draw a Scientist. So now that we've done Draw a Scientist 1.0, we've fleshed it out. We've kind of addressed the problem. Okay, we know that I can't name a female scientist. We know that I can't name a non-white mathematician. I've fleshed that out, and we've identified the fact that that's something that is. And I want to do something to change it. I want to do something that starts moving the ship in a different direction, so I can truly start doing the work of including all learners in this conversation. So where do we go? So these are the scientists that I grew up with as a kid. This is what I saw. So what I've done is, with a team of teachers, we created the Diverse Scientist Database. And this is a living spreadsheet of scientists from diverse backgrounds, that many of whom are living, with links to their descriptions, to their photos, to all this information about them, because there isn't really just a one website that does it. And I'm going to drop it in the chat. That way you can go ahead and save it. So go ahead and save it, bookmark it. It's always something that's being updated. I think there's about 250 different scientists on there. So now I have 250 plus scientists that represent various backgrounds. The next step that I do in the classroom, and I encourage teachers to do, is we start creating posters of scientists that look like our students. That way, our whole classroom teaches without us. Our whole classroom gives examples of mentors or examples of role models that our students can look at, that our students choose based on this database list, and say, that's something that I can do. That person looks like me. I want to follow that pathway, whether it's Albert Baez, whether it's Katherine Johnson. There's a variety of people. And so we did this one in Google Slides, but I also encourage teachers to use Canva, because it's free for educators and it's amazing. It makes your visuals look beautiful. It also teaches a digital skill, some graphics design. So if you're working on Chromebooks or computers or iPads or whatever you're using, you can access Canva, and your students can start designing their own poster. So now they have some choice, they have some agency, and they have some representation. Then you go and you print those things out, or you put it on display and you have a rotating show. And now when your students are looking around, in addition to reading what claim evidence reasoning is, in addition to seeing the periodic table, they're also seeing things or people that they could be one day. I did this before we had a lot of tech in the classroom, and we did the old school way. So we had the kind of manila folders or paper, and I had my students go online and start kind of Googling people. And then they cut out the flags, they cut out the pictures they can find, and then we laminated that and put it on the wall. And it was a beautiful activity. It was a lot of fun. And it's something that stayed up the entire year. And it was the most looked at and observed kind of wall aesthetic that I had. A lot of times we decorate our walls with things that appeal to us. But this is something that students create, but it's also layered because it's teaching in multiple ways. Not only did they create, but they also learned, and they also see themselves as STEM, as future STEMicists, whether it's science, technology, engineering, or mathematics. The next step in all of this, I think this work personally is something that is a process. It's not something that I think you can just do in an hour. I think it's something to get the most value is something that's ongoing. And so one thing that I encourage teachers to do is to form a community of practice. This is something that I spent the last year doing. If you're not familiar with a community of practice, don't worry. I wasn't either until about a year ago. But a community of practice is a group of people, almost like a network, but they meet regularly with a focused topic. Our focused topic was sharing resources to do this work to make our classrooms more inclusive in STEM. And so this is the team that I spent time with in the last year. There are a variety of educators, and then Desiree Whitmore from the Exploratorium up in San Francisco. And our goal was to create a website of resources that we can share with teachers so they can do this work, because it's really tough sometimes to vet all of this. And so in addition to having all of this information, having teachers be able to meet regularly, teachers that are on the same track, so they can talk and debrief once monthly was fine. And we spent an hour and a half talking about our experience, our applications, our successes, our failures. We got support. And in the end, after a year, we formed this amazing dynamic community. And this is one of the things as a teacher that I've realized create a lot of value for me, because as teachers, we can feel so siloed, even though we're surrounded by students and we're surrounded by our colleagues. When we're in our classroom, especially over the last year, we can feel so siloed and on our own. But when you're able to be part of a community of practice that focuses not just on something that's going to make you better as a professional, but also support your heart and mind as a learner, that's that intangible that's hard to find. And we find that when we're able to do that, we're also able to address a lot of the wellness of teachers, because doing this work is hard. It is a lot easier to simply teach my biology content and not engage in any of these topics. But if I'm a silent bystander, then I'm not able to participate in doing the justice and doing and progressing our society forward and helping our students. And if anything, I'm continually allowing some of the inequities to happen by not engaging in any way, shape, or form. And my students in the future will continue only drawing scientists that don't necessarily represent them. So I want to become the change that I want to see in my classroom, and I want to help other teachers be able to do the same. And so this is a couple of kind of tools and resources that I share with teachers in a variety of ways. There's also digital tools that we use, and discussion and kind of interactivity, because we learn best by doing. But hopefully this kind of gives you a good overview of how to provide STEM for all learners. And then from here, the next step would be, okay, how do we actually apply this work? How do I implement it into a lesson plan? What does this look like in a math classroom? What's the curriculum of people who are already doing this? Or what are the exemplars that I can look at so I can start doing it? And then when do we do our next session so we can talk and debrief and get some more ideas? So Molly, Lauren, that's what I got. And if there's questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I am more than happy to stay or share any resources that I have. If you're interested in the website that we created for our community of practice, I'll be happy to share that as well. But thanks for watching.
Thank you so much, Eric. You gave us so much to think about. Always so amazing. We love learning from you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for everyone joining us live. Go ahead and drop any questions that you have for Eric in the chat. We have one quick reflection question for you. I'm going to share my screen really quickly. So from this session, what is resonating with you? Just drop that in the chat. Okay, so so we would love to stay connected with you as well. So we are currently in the process of creating more workshops, more office hours with people like Eric and other amazing educators. So if you would like to stay connected with us, I'm going to pop up a quick poll, and you can just click yes if you'd like to join that community. Eric, can you see that poll?
I can.
Okay, good. And then we are also going to be sending you an email later today with a link to access this recording, all of the amazing resources that Eric shared. And then we also have an asynchronous workshop from Emma Pass, all on best practices in blended learning and lesson design, that will be adding in there as well. A great facilitation guide if you want to create more of a PD experience out of that. So keep your eyes peeled for that email. And then that's it. So if there's any questions, we'll go ahead and have Eric answer those really quickly.
So there's a YouTube bio by Dr. Jamie Dyer from Duke. So I'm just opening that up in a new tab right now. So I'm going to be watching that. And then there's another question about the community practice website. Absolutely. So here's the site that we created. And on it's a list of resources that we've collected as educators. So let's see, COP, and we're just starting our year 2 of our community of practice this year. And I'm a big fan. I think that the regular meetings, it creates a lot of value because you're getting the knowledge, but you're also getting the connection. And we learn best in social learning. There's a lot of research behind social learning. Yeah, I'm really excited for it to start again in September. But that's the website, so feel free to check it out. All of our contact information's on there, and there's a spreadsheet with a ton of resources.
We'll make sure we include that link in the email that goes out later today as well. That way you don't lose that link. So we'll give it another minute. Drop any other questions you have for Eric. Oh, there is no evaluation for this session. They don't have to worry about that. Oh, that's great. We're so glad you enjoyed the session, Linda. Eric is amazing.
Thanks, Linda. That's really encouraging to hear. I miss being able to see you all, but I appreciate the feedback. Thank you. You're very welcome.
All right. Well, it seems like everyone loved the session. We'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining us live. Thank you so much, Eric, for this amazing session. And hopefully we'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Have a great school year.